The Cowboy Who Didn't Reach for His Gun Until They Took His Wife. Part 1. The Silent Man on Blackstone Road. They pressed the barrel of a revolver against her temple in the middle of the lonely trail. "Tell your husband to hand over the deed," the outlaw growled. Evelyn Harper cried out, "Jonah." Her voice echoed across the empty desert. But the man sitting beside her on the wagon never moved. His hands rested loosely on his knees. His face showed no fear, no anger, no panic. He simply looked ahead, as calm as if the wind were the only thing passing through the valley. The 6 riders surrounding the wagon laughed. Their leader smiled beneath his black mustache. "Looks like you married yourself a scarecrow," he sneered. Evelyn stared at her husband in disbelief. For 6 months she had tried to understand Jonah Cross. He worked from sunrise until darkness. He repaired fences without complaint. He treated horses gently. He rarely smiled. He spoke only when words mattered. Sometimes she wondered if she had married a man who simply lacked courage. Now, staring into the cold eyes of armed riders, she believed she finally had her answer. The outlaw yanked her from the wagon. She struggled, kicking dust into the air. Another rider grabbed her wrists. "Jonah," she screamed again. Still nothing. No movement. No plea. No fight. Only silence. "You've got until next Saturday," the outlaw called. "Sign your ranch over to Mr. Beaumont, or your wife won't be coming home." The gang wheeled their horses around and disappeared into the rolling red hills. Evelyn looked back one last time. Jonah remained seated on the wagon exactly where she had left him. She felt something inside her break. Northern Arizona Territory. October, 1885. Cold winds drifted across the mesas long before winter officially arrived. Cottonwood leaves shimmered gold beside dry Eagle Creek. Dust covered every trail leading toward the little ranching settlement of Silver Mesa. Travelers hurried home before darkness settled over the empty country. People whispered that hard times were coming. Water was growing scarce. Land had become more valuable than gold. And men willing to steal it had begun appearing everywhere. No one knew that before another sunrise, half the county would remember the name Jonah Cross. 6 months earlier, Evelyn Harper had buried her father beneath a lone cottonwood overlooking the family pasture. The ranch carried debts she couldn't pay. Neighbors offered sympathy. Bankers offered deadlines. Then came Jonah Cross. He wasn't rich. He wasn't charming. He simply owned a modest ranch neighboring hers. He offered marriage without promises beyond honest work and shared burdens. She accepted because survival demanded practical choices. Love, she believed, could come later. Instead, she found herself living beside a man wrapped in quiet mystery. Jonah never drank. Never gambled. Never visited the saloon. He disappeared into the barn some nights after supper. When she asked where he had learned carpentry, he answered only different places. When she asked where he'd lived before Arizona, here and there. Always short answers. Always polite. Never enough. Still, he never lied. Never shouted. Never raised a hand in anger. He simply remained impossible to know. Their trouble began when Victor Beaumont arrived from California. Beaumont wore expensive suits even in dusty cattle towns. He carried polished boots instead of worn riding leather. Money followed him wherever he went. So did lawyers. Within 2 years he controlled most of the valley's water rights. Only one property interrupted his plans. The Cross Ranch. Dry Eagle Creek crossed Jonah's northern pasture before flowing toward Beaumont's expanding cattle empire. Without that creek, thousands of Beaumont's cattle would travel nearly 20 extra miles for water. Beaumont offered to buy the ranch. Jonah refused. He doubled the offer. Jonah refused again. Then fences began disappearing. Cattle vanished. Threatening notes appeared beneath the front door. Jonah burned every note without reading them aloud. Evelyn begged him. "We should leave." Jonah quietly shook his head. "This land belongs to us. Nothing more. No explanation." The gang leader called himself Wade Mercer. Everyone knew Beaumont paid him generously. Mercer enjoyed frightening people more than shooting them. Fear was cheaper than bullets. That afternoon he decided fear wasn't enough. He decided to take Jonah's wife. Long after the riders disappeared beyond the ridge, Jonah finally climbed down from the wagon. He knelt, studied hoofprints, measured distances. Not with a ruler. With his eyes. His expression never changed. He touched the dirt once, then climbed back onto the wagon. Instead of racing after them, he drove toward Silver Mesa. The town looked peaceful beneath the setting sun. Children chased chickens through the main street. A blacksmith hammered glowing iron. Music drifted from the Lucky Spur saloon. Jonah tied his horse outside. Walked inside. Ordered only water. Several ranchers glanced toward him. Word had already spread. Everyone knew Beaumont's riders had kidnapped his wife. One man finally laughed. "Your missus needed a braver husband." Nobody answered. Jonah calmly drank his water. Across the room sat an aging gambler named Calvin Briggs. Most folks thought Briggs spent too much time drinking to notice anything. They were mistaken. His faded blue eyes followed Jonah carefully. After several minutes Briggs stood. He approached quietly. "You've carried a badge before," he whispered. Jonah didn't answer. Briggs leaned closer. "No rancher checks every doorway before sitting down." Still nothing. "And those hands?" Briggs looked toward Jonah's relaxed fingers. "I've seen hands like that once." Jonah finally spoke. "My wife is being held." "I heard." "Where?" Briggs hesitated. Then sighed. "Old Miller Station." Jonah nodded once. "How many?" "6, maybe 7 by now." Another pause. "They'll expect you tomorrow." "They'll be disappointed." Briggs studied him carefully. "What was your name before Jonah Cross?" Silence. Then, "A name I buried." Jonah left without another word. Briggs watched him disappear into the fading evening. Only after the door closed did the old gambler whisper to himself, "Lord help those fools." Night settled across the desert. Jonah returned home. Instead of entering the house, he walked into the weathered barn. He pulled aside loose floorboards hidden beneath stacked hay. Underneath rested a long wooden chest covered in dust. He hadn't opened it in 7 years. Slowly, he lifted the lid. Inside lay 2 beautifully maintained Colt revolvers. A Winchester rifle. Boxes of carefully wrapped ammunition. A worn leather marshal's badge. And beneath everything else, a folded newspaper. The headline read, "Legendary Deputy Isaac Reed disappears after the Red Canyon Massacre." Jonah stared at the badge for a long moment. His eyes carried pain deeper than words. "I prayed I'd never need you again," he murmured. Outside, thunder rolled across distant mountains. Inside the barn, a forgotten man quietly became someone else. He cleaned each revolver with practiced hands. Checked every chamber. Loaded every cartridge. Buckled on the old gun belt. The leather fit as though it had never been removed. Before leaving the barn, he glanced once toward the empty house. "I should have told you the truth, Evelyn." He extinguished the lantern. Stepped into the cold Arizona night. And rode toward Old Miller Station. The men waiting there believed they had captured the wife of an ordinary rancher. By sunrise, They would learn they had declared war on the one man in the territory who had once hunted the most dangerous outlaws in the West. The ghost rides again. The moon hung low over the Arizona territory, casting pale silver across the desert as Jonah Cross rode alone toward Old Miller Station. His horse, the Ranger, seemed to sense the change in the man upon its back. The quiet rancher who spent his days mending fences had vanished somewhere between the barn and the open trail. In his place rode someone colder, sharper, a man who had once been known across the frontier by another name. 7 years earlier, lawmen and outlaws alike had spoken of Deputy Isaac Reed in hushed voices. He had never been the fastest man to draw. He simply never wasted emotion. Every bullet had purpose, every decision carried weight, and every fight ended before most men understood it had begun. Jonah had buried that life after the tragedy at Red Canyon. Tonight, he was digging it back up. At Old Miller Station, Evelyn Harper sat in a small upstairs room with barred windows overlooking the courtyard. She had spent hours studying every inch of the building. There were 6 guards. One watched the front gate. Another paced the roof every 15 minutes. 2 remained near the stable. Mercer and Beaumont's foreman occupied the downstairs office, drinking whiskey and laughing loudly. The 6th man wandered wherever he pleased, making him the most dangerous of all. Evelyn had not cried since sunset. Fear would not help her. Observation might. She loosened one of the rusty nails beneath the windowsill using the buckle from her boot. It was slow work, but every small advantage mattered. Downstairs, Wade Mercer leaned back in his chair. "You really think that husband of hers comes tomorrow?" One outlaw laughed. "That scarecrow? He'll sign the deed before breakfast." Mercer grinned. "I hope he tries something foolish." 20 miles away, Jonah stopped beside a dry wash. He climbed down from Ranger and crouched in the sand. Fresh hoofprints. 7 horses. Exactly as Briggs had guessed. He followed them another mile until the lights of Old Miller Station appeared between cottonwood trees. He didn't rush closer. Instead, he watched. For nearly 2 hours. He counted patrols. Measured distances. Noted lanterns. Memorized shadows. Patience had once saved his life more times than quick shooting ever had. At midnight, he finally smiled. Very slightly. They were careless. Back inside the station, Evelyn heard footsteps climbing the stairs. The door opened. Mercer entered carrying a lantern. He set it on the table. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble for your husband." She met his stare without blinking. "You'll regret this." Mercer chuckled. "I've heard that before." He stepped closer. "Tomorrow your husband signs over the ranch." "He won't." Mercer laughed harder. "You still believe in him?" She hesitated. Images of Jonah sitting motionless on the wagon flashed through her mind. Her confidence wavered. Mercer noticed. "I thought so." He left, locking the door behind him. Evelyn closed her eyes. For the first time, doubt felt heavier than fear. Outside, Jonah circled behind the station. A narrow creek flowed behind the property. Its gentle current masked sound. Perfect. He slipped through the cottonwoods like a shadow. The guard near the stable never saw him. One moment the outlaw leaned against the fence. The next, he collapsed silently into the hay, unconscious. Jonah caught him before he struck the ground. No noise. No gunfire. He tied the man's hands with his own belt. 5 remained. Inside the stable, Jonah found 6 horses. He smiled again. This time a little wider. He quietly opened every stall. The horses wandered into the darkness, disappearing across the open desert. No horses. No pursuit. Simple. Effective. The rooftop guard paused halfway through his patrol. Something sounded wrong. He leaned over the edge. Nothing. Just wind. He turned. A hand covered his mouth. Another pulled him backward. Seconds later, he lay unconscious beside the chimney. 4 remained. Near 2 o'clock, one of the outlaws stumbled outside carrying an empty whiskey bottle. He wandered toward the well. He never reached it. Jonah stepped from the darkness. 1 swift punch. The outlaw dropped without firing a shot. 3 remained. Inside, Mercer frowned. Tom's taking too long. Another outlaw shrugged. Probably sleeping beside the well. Mercer stood. I'll check. As he opened the front door, he froze. The hitching rail stood empty. Every horse was gone. His smile disappeared. Wake everyone, the station exploded into motion. Lanterns flared. Boots pounded across wooden floors. Men shouted over one another. Mercer grabbed his rifle. He's here. Upstairs, Evelyn heard the commotion. Gun belts buckled. Doors slammed. Someone yelled that the horses had vanished. Her heart pounded. Could it really be? No. Impossible. Jonah wasn't that man. Was he? Mercer stepped cautiously into the courtyard. Cross. Only silence answered. Then, somewhere beyond the stable, a calm voice drifted through the darkness. Let her go. Mercer spun toward the sound. You've got courage after all. No. The voice came again. I've got experience. A rifle cracked. Mercer fired instantly toward the sound. The bullet struck only empty fencing. Another shot rang out from a completely different direction. Mercer's hat flew from his head. The bullet hadn't touched him. It had sliced cleanly through the brim. A warning. Nothing more. Every outlaw suddenly understood. They weren't hunting a frightened rancher. They were facing someone who could have killed their leader and chose not to. Mercer's confidence cracked. Spread out, he shouted. Find him. The remaining gunmen disappeared into the darkness. Exactly as Jonah expected. Separated men made mistakes. Groups did not. He intended to keep them separated. Evelyn crept to the window. She could see almost nothing beyond the courtyard. Only shadows moving. Then, one shadow moved differently. Smooth. Deliberate. Almost effortless. For a brief second the moonlight touched the man's face. It was Jonah. But not the Jonah she knew. His shoulders were straighter. His eyes colder. His movements carried absolute certainty. The quiet rancher had vanished. Someone else had come for her. Someone far more dangerous. And before dawn, every outlaw at Old Miller Station would discover why some men spend years pretending to be ordinary. Not because they are weak. But because they know exactly what happens when they stop pretending. Like this story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next chapter. The biggest showdown is still ahead, and part 3 reveals the truth behind Jonah's past and the first deadly clash with Beaumont's gang.